I think it's fair to say that no one on the right side of America can stand the star of this movie. And yet, Christian, you've seen the movie, and it appears that the filmmakers cobbled together enough salvageable material to make the movie itself quite nice.
Megyn Kelly didn't just criticize Rachel Zegler, she obliterated her. While Hollywood elites scrambled to defend Disney's Snow White remake, Kelly saw the disaster unfolding in real time, and she wasn't about to let it slide. The controversy started when Zegler sat down for what should have been a simple press tour, but instead of hyping up the film, she took a torch to its legacy. In interview after interview, Zegler rolled her eyes at the original Snow White, calling it outdated and dismissing its story as weird. She openly laughed about how strange it was that Snow White waits for a guy to save her, making it clear that she thought the entire premise was beneath her. For Megyn Kelly, this wasn't just an actor being careless, it was career suicide. On The Megyn Kelly Show, she tore into Zegler's attitude, calling her out for biting the hand that fed her.
Now, I don't care what they say, like on camera or to magazines. Behind the scenes, you guys know as well as I do that those executives like Spielberg are looking at that saying, Rachel Zegler can F right off.
Do your job, Kelly snapped, her frustration palpable. Disney had handed Zegler a golden opportunity, the lead role in a film tied to one of the most iconic brands in entertainment history. And instead of showing gratitude, she ridiculed the very story that made her job possible. But Kelly didn't stop there. She pointed out the glaring hypocrisy in Zegler's behavior. If she thought Snow White was so problematic, why did she take the role? Why sign a contract with Disney, accept their money, and then publicly trash the movie? Hollywood actors weren't hired to rewrite beloved classics. They were hired to bring them to life. And yet, here was Zegler, talking about the film as if she had been forced into playing the part. Kelly's frustration mirrored the growing anger from Disney's core audience. Snow White wasn't just another movie. It was the first full-length animated film ever made, the foundation of Disney's empire. It had stood the test of time, beloved for nearly a century. And yet, Zegler, who hadn't even been born when the film celebrated its 50th anniversary, was acting as if she knew better than Walt Disney himself. For Kelly, the entire situation represented a much bigger issue in modern Hollywood: actors forgetting who actually pays their salaries. These people don't seem to understand, Kelly ranted. It's not about them, it's about the audience. She pointed out that actors today seem more focused on pushing their own personal agendas than respecting the legacy of the films they're hired to promote.
Snow White reviews are in. Snow White, how shall we say? Data points are in, because we now know that it was a flop.
Zegler wasn't just making a mistake, she was alienating the very fans who would decide whether Snow White succeeded or flopped. And the backlash proved Kelly right. Almost overnight, Zegler became one of the most disliked actresses in Hollywood. Social media was flooded with calls for Disney to recast the role entirely. Longtime Disney fans accused her of being entitled, arrogant, and completely out of touch. YouTube videos, news articles, and online forums all echoed the same sentiment. How could Disney let this happen? But the most brutal hit came at the box office. With each passing day, it became more obvious that Disney's live-action Snow White was in serious trouble. Predictions for ticket sales plummeted. Analysts speculated that Disney had quietly cut its marketing budget, realizing they had a disaster on their hands. By the time the film finally debuted, it was already doomed. Megyn Kelly saw it coming from the start. In her eyes, this was just another example of Hollywood's arrogance backfiring spectacularly. Zegler didn't just sink her own reputation, she helped drag Disney down with her. And when the dust settled, Kelly's verdict was clear. If actors want success, they need to remember one simple rule: respect the role, respect the audience, or be prepared to watch your career burn. And Kelly wasn't alone. Across media outlets, critics and commentators echoed her sentiment.
You know, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Yeah. Weird.
What started as a single wave of backlash quickly turned into a tidal wave of public outrage. Conservative voices, independent film analysts, even longtime Disney fans, all of them were asking the same question. If Rachel Zegler had such a problem with the original Snow White, why did she take the role in the first place? It wasn't just a rhetorical question. It was a fundamental issue that exposed the growing divide between Hollywood and its audience. Zegler hadn't just expressed mild criticism, she had gone out of her way to mock the 1937 animated classic, calling it outdated, weird, and even creepy. The irony was glaring. She had willingly signed on to a film based on a story she clearly didn't respect. She had cashed Disney's checks, posed for promotional photos, and walked onto set every day to play a character she had no real connection to. That wasn't just arrogance, it was bad business. Kelly hammered this point home. Actors weren't hired to rewrite beloved classics. They were hired to bring them to life. Audiences didn't want to see their favorite childhood stories dismantled and rebuilt according to an actor's personal ideology. They wanted to relive the magic, to feel the same wonder they had as children.
It does seem like the media have got the throw her under the bus green light, though, when we're posting things like this. We're slagging her off behind the scenes, we're dropping all the information, and then reminding you of, her attacking the majority of the population of America when she posted F the Orange Man.
But instead of honoring that, Zegler had made it clear that she was going to fix Snow White, as if something about it was broken. Other commentators joined in, pointing out how out of touch Hollywood had become. The industry had already suffered from a string of high-profile box office failures, many of them stemming from the same mistake, insulting or disregarding the audience. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny flopped after Harrison Ford's beloved character was sidelined in his own movie. The Little Mermaid struggled with its messaging after similar controversies. And now, Snow White was on the chopping block, falling victim to the same Hollywood arrogance that had sunk so many films before it. Social media influencers, YouTube film critics, and entertainment journalists all began dissecting the fiasco. YouTube channels dedicated entire videos to breaking down how Disney had lost its way, with headlines like "Disney's Snow White is doomed" and "Rachel Zegler just destroyed her own movie." Articles exposed how Disney had slashed the film's budget and quietly pulled back on marketing, seemingly aware that the backlash was unstoppable. Even former Disney employees chimed in, expressing frustration over how far the company had strayed from its roots. And then the numbers came in. Box office analysts had already predicted a weak opening, but the actual projections were catastrophic. Reports surfaced that Disney was quietly panicking behind the scenes, realizing too late that they had hired an actress who had alienated their core audience. Advanced ticket sales were embarrassingly low. Polls showed that even longtime Disney fans were losing interest.
Just last week, the media and the shill influencers were trying to do everything they could to save Snow White from being a complete and total flop in the box office, and they've failed miserably. This movie is already a complete and total disaster, and it is so bad that now even the media has to admit.
Instead of excitement, the film was met with groans and eye rolls. For Kelly, the verdict was clear. Zegler's comments weren't just unprofessional. They were box office poison. Her arrogance didn't just hurt Snow White. It hurt Disney's brand as a whole. Audiences were tired of actors lecturing them, tired of seeing beloved classics torn apart to fit Hollywood's latest agenda. And worst of all, Disney had let it happen. At this point, the damage was irreversible. Rachel Zegler had single-handedly turned a surefire hit into an industry-wide cautionary tale. And as the release date loomed, one thing became painfully obvious. Hollywood wasn't listening, but the audience? They were about to make their voices heard in the one place that mattered most, the box office. And the numbers didn't lie. Long before Snow White even hit theaters, box office analysts saw the warning signs. Pre-release tracking was abysmal. Disney's past live-action remakes, The Lion King, Aladdin, even the controversial The Little Mermaid, all had a certain level of built-in hype.
This thing was a disaster. It only made $43 million at the box office, which is really bad for a movie like this. I don't have the numbers at the top of my head, but I want to tell you, Cinderella, which was a number of years ago, don't forget how much inflation has happened.
But Snow White? It had nothing. No buzz, no excitement. Just a swirling storm of controversy that had driven away the very people who should have been Disney's most loyal customers. Industry experts slashed their opening weekend predictions. At first, some optimistically projected a decent turnout, citing Disney's strong global presence. But as the backlash intensified, those numbers kept dropping and dropping. By the time the film was in its final marketing push, analysts were openly calling it a disaster in the making. Disney, once confident in its ability to print money with live-action remakes, was now bracing for impact. Meanwhile, social media remained relentless. Every time Disney posted a new promo, the comment sections filled with criticism, mockery, and outright rejection. Audiences weren't just annoyed, they were furious. The more Zegler's past interviews resurfaced, the more her words came back to haunt her. Clips of her calling the original film weird and outdated were played over and over, fueling the fire. Fans who had grown up loving the 1937 classic felt insulted, dismissed, and ignored.
You're crying on that stage.
When am I not crying in public? It's so upsetting.
Why were you crying?
Oh my gosh, I saw the well, we didn't even see. We didn't even see, but I saw the logo and I went, that's my name. Snow White's up there.
Even worse, Disney's attempts at damage control only made things worse. They scrambled to shift the conversation, releasing new trailers that tried to sell the film as a fresh, empowering take. But the audience saw through it. The damage was done. The trust was gone. And people weren't just talking about Snow White anymore. They were talking about Disney's entire identity crisis. Then, the film finally hit theaters. And just like Megyn Kelly had predicted, the audience rejected it completely. Opening weekend numbers were brutal. Movie theaters sat half empty, even in major cities. Families who might have once rushed to see a Disney princess film stayed home. The film was dead on arrival, unable to generate even a fraction of the excitement that previous Disney remakes had. Critics tore it apart, calling it lifeless, uninspired, and completely unnecessary. But the worst part? Audiences agreed. Cinema score ratings were terrible, word of mouth was toxic, and within days, it was clear. Snow White wasn't just a flop, it was a catastrophe. And Disney knew it. Reports leaked that executives were panicking behind the scenes.
So did you go directly from West Side? Like, did you have to audition for Snow White, or like, oh, they saw you in West Side Story, they're like, you're Snow White?
West Side Story was kind of nowhere near coming out. We were about like 6 months away from release and no footage had been seen.
The studio had already been struggling after a string of underperforming films, and now one of its most iconic properties had crashed and burned. The damage extended beyond just this movie. It was yet another blow to Disney's already fragile reputation. Investors took notice. Stockholders raised concerns. And as the numbers rolled in, one truth became undeniable. Audiences were done being lectured to by Hollywood. Megyn Kelly had called it from the very beginning. If an actor disrespects the material, if a studio ignores its fans, if a film spends more time preaching than entertaining, the audience will walk away. And this time, they did. Megyn Kelly's verdict was brutal but undeniable. Rachel Zegler had one job: to play Snow White, not to rewrite it, not to critique it, not to use it as a platform for her own opinions. Just play the role, bring the character to life, and let the magic of Disney do the rest. But instead, she turned what should have been a fairy tale success into a raging controversy. Kelly didn't mince words. She insulted the original movie. She insulted the fans, and now she's paying the price, she declared on her show. And the truth was impossible to ignore. What had started as a simple casting announcement had spiraled into one of Disney's biggest PR disasters in years. Instead of making headlines for its stunning visuals, talented cast, or nostalgic appeal, Snow White had become a punchline.
Snow White, the toe-curlingly terrible live-action remake, has bombed so hard at the box office that even Paul Tassi had to admit it. It got $43 million, and there are very few ways to spin that.
A symbol of everything wrong with modern Hollywood. But Zegler's biggest mistake wasn't just her words. It was her attitude. People weren't just upset by what she said about the 1937 classic, they were furious at how she said it. The smirking, the condescension, the way she rolled her eyes at the idea of a traditional princess. It all rubbed audiences the wrong way. She didn't come across as a young actress excited to bring a beloved character to life. She came across as someone who thought she was better than the story she had been hired to tell. And Kelly wasn't the only one who noticed. Hollywood insiders began whispering that Zegler's arrogance had backfired. Disney executives were reportedly scrambling, desperately trying to shift the film's marketing strategy to repair the damage. But the backlash had already taken root. Social media was relentless. Memes mocking Zegler flooded Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Clips from her interviews were shared and reshared, each one fueling the fire. The comment sections were brutal. filled with users saying they had no interest in watching a movie led by someone who seemed to hate the very story she was supposed to represent. But the real reckoning came when audiences had their say. When the film finally hit theaters, it wasn't just met with bad reviews, it was ignored. Box office numbers were dismal. Movie theaters sat half empty on opening weekend, and fans who once would have lined up for a Disney princess movie stayed home. And for a company that had built its empire on family-friendly fairy tales, that kind of rejection was the worst possible outcome. Kelly had predicted it all: the backlash, the disappointment, the failure. And in the end, her words rang true. When actors forget who they're working for, when they alienate the very audience that supports them, the audience will remind them. Not with angry tweets or online petitions, but with something far more powerful: their wallets.